Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm George Binns, and I'm here with my co-host, Gail Burke. This evening we have as our guest Jason Silva, Councilor at Large for the City of Beverly. And the subject this evening we want to talk about is the move in Beverly to expand on the affordable housing. Right now, as I remember, Jason, the city's got 12% affordable housing, which means we're above the minimum requirement by the state.
A little under 12. Yep.
A little under 12, okay. And I guess we need to start off with what is really affordable housing?
Well, good question. I think it varies, obviously, based on income, but what's considered affordable housing right now is 80% of area median income. In Beverly, that's for a family of four, that's about $75,000 a year. So, and if you...
the 80% is 70%, or is 80% is 75,000?
75,000. And so for a rent, it's 30% of that, which is about $1,800 a month. So it's, for me, that's actually not affordable. For my family, that's not affordable. And so, so I think that's something we need to work on. The City of Beverly, if you want me to start talking about some of the things that we're doing, we do have an inclusionary zoning ordinance on the books that for any housing development over 10 units, there's a requirement that 12% need to be affordable. And that's based on the 80% AMI. So there's a movement now to look at the inclusionary zoning to see, is 80% really affordable? Or should we look at reducing the 80%? Should we look at some modifications? There's also a payout provision. So developers who don't want to actually include affordable housing in their development, they can give a cash payment over to the city in lieu of constructing the actual unit. So
what does the city do with that cash payment?
So we just recently created an affordable housing trust fund. So the affordable housing trust fund is there, and those monies go into the trust fund. It can be used for... Will they end up as vouchers for the... Can be used for a number of different things, and that's being talked about. The city also just completed a housing study, and is the final report's not out yet, but it's close to being ready. And so there will be a number of recommendations in the housing report that that make recommendations on how best to use that money. But it can be anything from first-time home buyers assistance to rental assistance, to housing rehab programs for renters who offer affordable housing to people. So a number of things like that that we're hoping, that I know the city is working on right now.
So, well, how much did the new condos on Elliott Street, how much did they pay in order to not have affordable housing as part of their complex?
I forget off the top of my head, to be honest with you, but I know they did make a payment to the city, but I forget the exact number.
And how is that amount determined? Does the city council determine it?
I think it's written into the ordinance as a percentage, but again, that's actually something that's...
It comes out of the 12%. It's either 12% in cash or 12% in physical structure.
Yeah, it's something that we're looking at now to say, well, are we giving an easy out to developers who would rather make a payment that's not really in line with what the actual construction of a unit would be? So looking at and having conversations now about, well, maybe we need to increase the payout so that it's more in line with the actual construction cost to actually build these units in these developments.
Now, is HUD involved at all in any of these developing condos or apartments?
Yeah, so I should say I'm not an affordable housing expert. I mean, there's a lot of financial assistance that's involved in a lot of affordable housing projects at the federal level and at the state level. And a lot of them are really complex financial deals that include tax credits and other grant assistance. Thankfully, I don't put those deals together, so I'm not an expert in how exactly all those finances come together to make a deal work. But I know there are organizations out there like the North Shore CDC, like Harbor Light Community Partners, that do a lot of work like that in the North Shore region. That Mickey Northcutt is the executive director of the North Shore CDC. Andrew DeFranza, the executive director, who's a resident of Beverly as well, executive director of Harbor Light Community Partners. Those are the folks that really are on the front lines to make these developments move forward. And the financial components, especially now there's a lot of uncertainty now in terms of how the financing of these projects is going to be moving forward with the new federal administration. So there are a lot of questions. The exact questions in terms of how those financing models. It's pretty complex, I know, and but in terms, I'm not an expert in that.
Well, I understand that, but I think the reason that I need some clarification on it is because whenever you take HUD money or federal money or grant money, you lose some of the local control. And I just wondered if you have total control over the building and what happens, and for instance, the number of parking spaces that are available, or is that determined by somebody that is not part of the city government?
No, there's local control over these projects entirely, even with the financing model. I mean, these projects need to go through local permitting processes in order, and unless you're below the 40B%, which then there's a little more. There can be 40B projects by right, which thankfully the city of Beverly is not below the 10% right now. However, but yeah, the permitting process is not changed as far as I know, based on the financing model. It still needs local approvals from the planning board, if relevant, the zoning board of appeals and the like. So I don't believe there's any control lost. And usually the financial incentives from the federal government or state government are usually, my understanding is, directly attached to the project. So it's the project that's being proposed, not the other way around, that the feds and the state is telling what we need to do. So,
to your specific question, when these projects are proposed, they go to the planning board for approval and get their permits. Then they go to the Parking and Traffic Commission on the number of parking spaces. And there have been a number of cases recently where the Parking and Traffic Commission has looked at, well, how many people normally have cars in these buildings?
Right.
And as a result, we don't need to require the full list of how many parking spaces. We can get away with something less, because a lot of what they're doing right now, especially in Beverly and downtown, is trying to advocate space for people who are going to use the trains. So there's a lot of effort on that downtown section to be tied into the train station. And as a result, it reduces the requirement on the parking lots.
yeah.
So that's one of the things that's happening right now.
Yeah, and to be clear about that, the development downtown in particular, especially near the train station, there's a component of that will, I hope, will be affordable housing, but the majority of that is market rate housing that's being developed privately being developed in that area. So we're talking about rents that are higher than what would qualify for affordable housing, and a lot of them, especially the new construction in that area, because the amenities that are available and the fact that it's right next to the train station.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, as you know, that's kind of been the focus and a goal of the city for quite a while, is to reinvigorate redevelopment and redevelop that area near the train station.
Yeah, and as a result, this new building that's going up in front of the train station, part of the deal with that is they're trying to get, and the mayor has mentioned this, they're trying to get a deal with the MBTA that, okay, you can buy a monthly pass for the train for some reduced fare.
Right.
Also, you can get a reduced pass for the parking garage. So you can get a reduced rate there, trying to encourage people to use the parking garage. So there's a lot of effort going on to minimize it. But I think the one issue that I would like to discuss a little bit longer is right now the city is talking about affordable housing at the corner of Sawyer and Tozier Roads.
Right.
61 units, I think, or something
Yeah, that's
like
correct.
that.
Yeah.
Now, are these apartments or condos?
Apartments.
Apartments, yeah. Now,
That's the developer. I think the owner is Harbor Lake Community Partners.
okay, so that we're going to have 61 units. It's going to be pretty close to the high school.
Yeah.
A little distance from any elementary schools. The concern, I guess, that I've seen written up already is how many more kids are we going to get? How much bigger is the school system going to get?
Right.
The high school right now is over design capacity. The middle school, by the time it opens, will be just at the limit. It'll probably run over capacity. What's the incentive to the city to get involved in some of these projects when it's going to mean we got to put more expenses into existing facilities?
Great question. I think that so the proposal on Sawyer Road, there's a meeting actually tonight about it.
Yeah.
It's about the creating a 40R overlay district. It's a zoning district on that property, and my understanding is what that 40R zoning would allow is that because it would be creating a portion of that would be for homeless families, and because it's affordable housing, it allows the city to access additional funds from the state. So a one-time cash payment and then annual payments, which again, my understanding is that it covers the difference for any children that are in that development, that live in that development. Annually, because it's a 40R zoning district, we would get the difference and get reimbursed those costs.
Yeah, my concern is, we'll get money from the state to compensate for the additional students.
Yeah.
But it's going to either push up class sizes or it's going to force us to build more structure.
It's
So I'm not convinced that we get an even break on a deal like that.
Yeah, it's hard to predict. I mean, sometimes there's capacity in classrooms too.
Yeah.
And you get the tax revenue from the development, and you don't have any additional cost to get an additional student. So, and in addition to that, there's Chapter 70 money that we get from the state in order to per student on a per student basis. So there is state offsets in terms of that. So I know it's a complicated issue for sure, and I know that it's something that the school committee and the superintendent pay a lot of attention to in terms of growth trends and how it will affect class size, because that's, let's face it, that's the number one issue that we hear from parents is class size and the attention they're getting from their teachers and their paras. So no, absolutely, it's an issue. I think overall it's certainly a question, and I think there are probably differences of opinions, but I think it's a question of what type of community we want to be, and do we want to be a community that says, okay, we don't want any more families here, and we're going to shut the gates, or do we say we want to welcome more families in? I mean, as you may know, I grew up here, and it was a terrific experience, and one that I grew up in low-income housing in Beverly, right across the street from the high school on Bresnahan Court. And I'm going to be honest with you, if it weren't for the fact that Beverly was such a welcoming community and supported our family, but also me personally, I'd be in a very different place right now. Mm-hmm. And so through that experience, not only did I go into public service, because I saw the effect that people can have just as activists in the community, but also just as neighbors. I just think that's what makes Beverly such a great community. And I, for one, wouldn't want to change that. And now, does it have to be thoughtfully approached, and do we have to be reasonable about this to make sure that the impacts don't outweigh the positives? Absolutely, 100%. We need to do that, and it's important that we do. But
that kind of brings up the question of, for instance, Salem is debating now about whether or not to become a sanctuary city. And when you're talking about being welcoming and all of that, then that's all well and good. But I have to ask, if Beverly were to consider becoming a sanctuary city, how would that affect the city? Because in reading some of the newspaper reports about what Salem wants to do, it's breaking the law. And they're welcoming, and they're going to provide sanctuary for illegals, people who are here illegally, which, number one, that's breaking the law because they're not supposed to be here. But secondly, it has to do with an increase in crime from people who are here illegally, and it may not be always violent crime, sometimes it is, but it also has to do with the drugs coming into a community. And you know, we all have a drug problem, Beverly, Salem, you know, these drugs are coming over the border, and we're having a problem dealing with that. So if that were to become the case, where Beverly said, okay, we're going to be a sanctuary city, what do the citizens of Beverly do? I mean,
Well, I think even before you get into the issue of the sanctuary city, public housing has got a mixed reputation. There were the classic cases of Cabrini Green in Chicago, Ego Prudo in, I think it was St. Louis, where they actually built these huge facilities and then tore them down because they got out of control. So that's one of the issues that I think that the city needs to discuss, even without getting into sanctuary cities issues of where are you going to put these and how concentrated an area do you want to have? And the issue we started to mention earlier about contractors, developers who can pay money to the city in lieu of building facilities that are affordable. Yeah, it probably makes the building somewhat unattractive if somebody down the hall is paying half the rent that I'm paying. It would probably irritate me and make it difficult for you to sell me a piece of property. At the same time, if we start going too deep into having cash in lieu of facilities, then we end up, okay, we're going to have a concentrated area like we're doing for the Sawyer Road, Tugger Road exercise. There's 61 units, all affordable housing, right there. Across the street from it is Northridge, which is also an affordable housing kind of area, as I understand it. So when does this get to be too much of a concentration? And based on, again, on your experience in these things, does it help to be in an area with homogeneous affordable housing, or does it help to have a mix of various levels?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, that's why I think the inclusionary zoning ordinance is so important.
What is it?
Because
Explain that.
it requires new development to include a percentage of those units as affordable. And so that's why,
And they don't get the option for the cash.
No, there's that option as well.
Okay.
Now,
So
is
it requires one or the other.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's still, they can still buy out.
They can, but and some do, and some actually include the units.
but is
And so-
affordable housing the same as low-income housing?
No. Like I said earlier, the
That's
affordable
the
housing
difference.
rate is literally $1,800 a month
Okay,
right
so-
now. It's in some cases it's over market, but it's new construction, and that's what it is. And I mean, I don't know what you think. I don't think $1,800 a month is affordable, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, what do you consider low income, and how much low income
that's Section
do we
8?
have in Beverly?
So how many low-income units?
Yeah.
The low-income, that's public housing typically, which is the Beverly Housing Authority. Again, I don't know their number count, their unit count off the top of my head. But I will say, I think having mixed incomes in mixed units in a development is a positive thing. So the inclusionary zone, the intent of the inclusionary zoning, I think, is the ideal scenario. The reality of the situation, though, in what the housing study, I think, is going to end up showing, and we've seen, it's been presented to us preliminarily in front of the City Council, is that there is a real housing need, and not just affordable housing, by the way. There's a need for housing almost across the board. So, and it's not just in Beverly. It's in Beverly, but it's not just in Beverly. It's really a regional problem.
Yeah, it's the whole North Shore.
It's the whole North Shore area. So
you're talking apartments,
I'm talking about
condos, or single homes?
I'm talking about all types, yeah. And so I think that I think the plan is going to be very instructive to us the study is going to be instructive to us to develop a plan on how to address the need. And I think that's really kind of the next phase and the next step as we move forward. I mean, the mayor has been really active in this as well. He showed real leadership and signed an MOU with Salem and Peabody, I believe, in terms of affordable housing and developing more of it. And I think that, but I think in general, the housing stock is not where it needs to be. So being thoughtful and planning, for reasonable development in certain areas is going to be important. I understand your point in terms of high density, but I think there's a real need in the community for affordable housing.
What's driving this need for more housing? Did that report get into that at all?
What's driving the need? I'm not.
Well, you say there is a definite need.
There
Why?
is. There
Why
is.
is
I was
that?
hoping you would
question.
say that there's an awful lot of jobs in this area
I know.
that people are applying for
I'm
and
not
they
sure.
can't live.
I'm not sure what's driving it, but
Well, if
the
you
need is
have-
real. It's been identified.
But
for
if you
sure.
join in to say you joined with Peabody and Salem or whatever other communities, how much control do you have over, say, the size of the units or the size of the building?
Complete.
Or do you have to
No.
confer with the
No.
other cities
No,
in order
complete.
to do anything?
No.
So what is the
Complete control.
advantage of joining with these other communities?
The advantage is acknowledging the fact that it's a regional issue that Beverly can't solve alone on its own. So acknowledging the fact that there's going to have to be cooperation across city and town lines in order to really address it most effectively. And I think just that is significant progress. It's not going to get you there, but it's a really good start.
What it really means is we all lobby together.
So does that mean you get more money from the state or from the feds? Or
Go to the
whoever?
state as a group and say that, hey,
Yeah.
it's an
It's
area
always the money.
problem. It's not just Beverly, it's not just Salem, it's not just
Right.
Peabody and Danvers, and throw all the rest of the towns in as well. So it's a joint effort to get support from higher authority to make some of this stuff happen.
I mean, I've been thinking about that. Whoever asked it, why the need? I think one of the reasons is the market. The market is really, first of all, there's just not enough housing stock. I guess based on population growth and those moving in the area,
Yeah.
but the market right now is really, really aggressive, and the rents right now are really, really high.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so I think
he-
that's putting a lot of people in a very difficult situation.
Well, there's two parts to that thing. I can understand a need for more housing if there are more jobs that people are trying to apply for and they want to live in the area. Also, there's a move to get out of the big city and move to the suburbs. This has been going on since the end of World War II. So I can see those things driving the issue. The other half of the thing that makes me concerned is the old story about if you build it, they will come. So if we keep building more and more affordable housing, what are we attracting into that area?
Yeah.
And
Well,
again,
affordable housing has this connotation, a negative connotation with a lot of
Yeah.
people, but it's workforce housing. It's people who have full-time jobs, who have families, and who need to get by and need to make ends meet. I mean, it's teachers, it's firefighters, they're police officers. I mean, they're professional people who are having trouble making ends meet. And so, by the way, there are people on the lower end of the spectrum who, on lower end of the income levels that need assistance too. But there's a wide range of folks who are having trouble making ends meet because of the high rents in the area. So I don't think, we're not talking about one group of individuals. I mean, I was in low-income housing. I grew up in low-income housing. It wasn't affordable housing. It was.
I know.
It was
I did
about.
too.
It was about a quarter of
I did
what
too.
they're
Is that
paying.
Section 8?
And well, there's either public
No, that's
housing or
separate.
Section 8 vouchers.
Okay.
Section 8
That's a
vouchers
separate.
are mobile. They can go into. You can
Anywhere,
use them in apartment, private homes.
Yeah.
But
I hate to interrupt, but we're almost out of time, so we have about another minute
Yeah.
that we can continue this conversation. And I know a little bit about Section 8. I used to own a two-family home,
Yeah.
and we rented to Section 8,
sure.
and we had a lot of problems with it.
What kind of problems?
Non-payment of rent, kids acting out, damaging property, that sort of thing.
Okay.
I'm not in Beverly. I
Yeah.
didn't live in Beverly at the time. But, so I know about that. I also grew up in low-income housing, so I know a little bit about it.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes the low-income housing is in a certain section of the city and not others. So, and I believe that there are certain sections of the city that probably will never have it, and for what it's worth. But the affordable housing, I understand there is a difference. I just wanted to throw in one more thing about the sanctuary city thing. I know you don't want to talk about it, but I do.
Yeah.
And how, if, for instance, Beverly were to join in and do what Salem appears to be ready to do, how is that going to affect the housing if we have a number of immigrants, legal or not,
So
coming
I have
into the city?
no idea what Salem's doing, to be honest with you. I'm not sure, so I can't speak for the city of Salem or what they're trying to do. There's another meeting tonight that on I think
Sanctuary City.
immigration in Beverly, and I think the police department, is it right? Am I right? The police chief and others are going to be on a panel
John
for.
Mullady.
Is John Mullady
He
on the
wants
school
the
committee?
schools to become
Yeah, he has a
sanctuaries. Yeah.
proposal now for the school district.
Yeah.
And I know that discussions are happening. I'll just say this, that, and I know you were talking about the immigrant population earlier,
The illegal immigrants, I'm mostly
the
concerned about.
undocumented folks. Yep. And so I don't. There are a lot of undocumented immigrants right now that don't fit the profile that you described. That aren't dealing drugs. That aren't doing drugs.
But they're
that
still
aren't-
illegal.
That aren't.
That gets
that
to be a
aren't-
practical problem. We're
that
not
aren't
going to
com-
round up
that
11
aren't-
million people and ship them out.
I didn't say that we
No.
were.
That aren't
but
committing-
we have to be concerned
Okay,
about
can I?
the problem.
You asked me a
Go
question.
ahead.
That aren't committing crimes and have been good citizens in the city and elsewhere in the state, and so this is more of a. I think I see it as more of a federal issue, but there's a lot of uncertainty now in how they're going to be treated, and they've been contributing members of the community and other communities for a long time, and so that's something that I'm certainly concerned about. And the sanctuary city status, we don't. There's no proposal in front of us. We haven't seen anything, and I don't know that there's any plans for that.
Okay.
But I do.
have to cut you off there. I'm
One
sorry.
more, but I
Sorry,
do
Jason.
think it's an important question, an important discussion to have, because there are clearly different opinions on the issues,
Yeah.
and I think it will be healthy to have that conversation.
I agree with you.
Yep, you're welcome
right,
to come
well,
back.
Thank you
Okay.
very much for
Thank you.
coming, and we hope that you will return.
I will.
Thank
Anytime.
you all for watching, and we will see you next time.